prior to this, my mother was my first editor, okay? And when I started writing full-time, she literally would edit everything I wrote. So I knew what my voice was. And by the way, it's pretty close to hers. Not because we worked together, but just, genetics, I guess, right? So I was familiar with that. I was familiar with her voice because over the years, I've read her other books. Her young adult novels were about young adult characters, but there were older characters in there. Her voice has always stayed the same. So I was very familiar with it. And my goal was to be true to her voice because, again, it was hers. So I really leaned into that. And I want people, unless they know me and they know certain parts that I definitely wrote, which I won't tell you, certain activities or whatever, I don't want them to realize that I wrote it versus my mom. I want it to be seamless.
Everybody, welcome back to Living the Next Chapter. I have an amazing author on the podcast. New book coming out. And if you want to join a club, we have a club for you to join, and it's based on the book. And I'm excited to have on the podcast today, Margie's on the show, where we're going to talk about all things about her journey as an author, celebrate the launch of her new book. Excited to have her here. Margie, welcome to Living the Next Chapter. Glad to have you here.
Thanks so much for having me, Dave.
Excellent. Tell everybody where you are in this great, big, gorgeous world of ours.
Well, I have to tell you that I'm in a really beautiful place right now. I'm in Boca Raton, Florida, which is South Florida, in its high 70s today. I don't want anyone to be jealous, but this is our season. In the summer, you'll be glad you don't live here, but right now it's a pretty nice place to be.
Nice. Well, as a Canadian, I am very jealous, and that's why a lot of our Canadian people go down there to enjoy your beautiful part of the world. So,
yes,
excellent.
They do.
Good. Excellent. That's great. Let's start off talking about your journey as an author. It's a great place to begin. How did all this happen for you? Who or what showed up in your life and said, Margie, you need to be an author. You need to write a book?
Well, no one did that for a very long time. So for most of my life, definitely before I was 50, I worked in the business world. So I had studied finance in college, and I also have an MBA. So I worked for a couple of big companies. Then I ended up going into business for myself. I started a public relations business, and I did that for about 20 years. And then around age 50, I started this thing called the Margie Project, which sounds very selfish, but I didn't name it that. My friend named it that. Where I was really looking at my life thinking, okay, well, at least half of my life is done now. And I've done what I'm supposed to do. I was married. I had a kid. I saved some money. Now what is Margie supposed to do with her life? So I really had to think about it. I ended up spending my 50th year with different friends and different experiences. And what I learned, in addition to how to ride a motorcycle and how to skydive, was that I was burnt out from my PR business, and I wanted to finally shift into writing, which was what everyone thought I was going to do since I was a kid. I had always written things for the newspaper and poems, and my mom was a writer, but I didn't really want to live the lifestyle she lived, truthfully, and I liked business. So it took me a while to get to that point, but before I became an author, I became a writer.
Okay. That's amazing. I like that. It's kind of nice to find the roots of our guests when they come on the show, and what was that spark and what was that thing. Some people say they've been writing since they were children. Some people just picked it up later on in life, and this became their new thing. So it's amazing. And I like that you have this other world that you were a part of before that is inspiration for you as an author in some degree.
Yeah.
That you can pull into your writing as well.
Yes.
So it's great. So tell us about the idea about the Cabernet Club, because there's two names, author names on the book, which we're going to get into.
Yeah.
But the idea for the book, like, it's a very unique situation. And I'd love for you to kind of unpack that for the audience as they're listening.
Okay, so in order to do that, I really have to give the backstory of how the book came to be, if that's okay.
Sure, let's go there.
Okay, so the first draft of the Cabernet Club was written by my mom, Rona S. Zable, who also was an author of young adult and middle grade books in the 1980s and 1990s. And they were actually published by major New York City publishers. So she actually wrote those books at night after her day job, which at the time was as editor of something called Senior Scope, which was the largest senior citizen newspaper in New England at the time. Probably still is. But anyway, so she was very, very busy. That's when I went to college. So I guess she didn't have to worry about me anymore. So she worked during the day and then she wrote at night. But this was about, 30 plus years ago, she wrote those novels. And then over the years, she had gone ahead and decided that she wanted to write an adult novel. So literally, she had been writing some version of the Cabernet Club, no word of a lie, through many iterations in different settings for over 20 years. So when I got my hands on it, it was a difficult time for us. Basically, my mom was very, very sick. We didn't know what was going on with her, and sadly, we found out at the 11th hour through a series of crummy medical missteps, I think, but that's another story. At the 11th hour, we found out that mom had pancreatic cancer and that it was everywhere. So we brought her home, and one of the first things I said to her was, I'm going to publish your book. Because it had been hanging around, she had been talking about it for years. She had been going to writers' groups, talking through it. We had been talking about it for many, many years. And she had never published an adult novel. And I always said, this is such a great novel. It would be the gift to the world. I really always thought it would be a gift to the world. And I can explain why later. But anyway, so she said to me, don't bother. What are you talking about? She was very sick. So I said, well, worst comes to worst, I could self-publish it. And she goes, oh, no. That's not okay. Don't bother. If you're going to self-publish, don't bother. Because, she had a little bit of an ego, even though it was 30 years ago. She had her books published. She goes, no, we're not going to do that. I said, all right, I'm going to find a publisher for this. So she's like, yeah, okay, whatever. Then 5 days later, she passed away. So it was really brutal. My mom was a single parent. I'm an only child. We were very, very close. So the grieving process was brutal, but I immediately had a project. And I like projects. Projects are good for me. I always enjoyed them. So I decided that I would just immerse myself in figuring out how to get this novel published. Really soon after the funeral, I decided to tell my clients, who at the time were various writing companies or media outlets, I said, I need to take some time off and I need to work on this novel, getting it published. So I did do that, but what I found out very early on was that it needed a lot of work. Do you want me to keep going?
Yeah, no, this is great. Like, was it a complete story? Everything was all done, or were you having to pick up pieces and try to put a puzzle back together?
It was fully done. Okay.
Okay.
And that said, I will tell you the ending. I don't think I changed a word on the ending. Okay. So
okay.
we knew where the story was going. However, in hindsight, and literally she had things on the computer, but she also had a stack literally at least 6 to 8 inches high she printed out stuff. So she printed out so many different versions of this stuff. So in hindsight, what I realized she did when I remembered our conversations was she would go to these writers groups, and you've probably heard of them, but say like every Saturday morning there would be a writers group. And what you'd do is you'd bring something to read and you'd get critiqued. Okay.
Yeah.
And I remember her telling me that everyone loved her funny scenes because my mom was great at characters and funny scenes. And there's plenty of that in this novel. But she really leaned hard on that stuff. So I had a lot of really funny scenes and characters, but I really needed to put it together with a plot and conflict and all the things that make something into a narrative drive, right? So it was a first draft, but it needed work. I knew it needed work. And I was like, well, I'm a freelance writer. I mean, I've never written fiction before. I'm a good reader. This shouldn't be that hard. But then I quickly learned I was totally clueless. Writing fiction is a whole nother animal than writing, my helpful articles that I would write, right?
Yeah, right.
So I had to figure out, and I gave myself 3 months. During that time, I listened to a ton of podcasts, and I can talk about which ones and what I learned from them.
Yeah.
Plenty of great ones on how to write fiction and market fiction, all that kind of stuff. I researched information online, and I actually hired a developmental editor because I knew that I didn't know what I didn't know.
Yeah.
So I knew there was something missing from reading so many books. I'm like, something's missing, don't quite know what. So I hired this editor who went through chapter by chapter and also looking at the big picture, what was missing and what I needed to change, which was extremely helpful because it really helped me focus on what I needed to work on. And then by the end of the 3 months, I had added 20,000 words. I had added new plot lines, changed the opening, added a stronger central conflict, put in a timeline, all kinds of stuff to really make it a strong story with a lot of ups and downs, fun, sad, happy, all this stuff, conflict, all that kind of things, not just interesting scenes of which there are plenty, which, of course, go towards the novel, but really a book that could really have a message that could go beyond just the funny stuff.
Okay. All right. So I'm kind of envisioning comparing your process to maybe someone buying a house, a fixer-upper, and then going in there and making changes and making it work better and making it flow better and all this stuff. There's the structure's there, but there's some tweaks that have to happen. Is that kind of the rough idea?
Kind of, but they were pretty big tweaks.
Big tweaks.
Yeah. Yeah,
Good.
They were, yeah. But yes, I mean, ultimately, people keep asking me, how much of the book did you write and how much did your mom write? And I would say it's probably about 60-40 at this point.
Okay.
But really, it is her book, and that's why she is the first person listed as the co-author, and I am the second one, right? But I do have some other books in the series in development, so those will be mine.
Okay. Well, that's interesting.
Yeah.
How much conversation have you had with your mom over the years about the Cabernet Club? Like, what's your earliest recollection of her talking to you about this project?
Wow, that's a great question. Can I just tell you, my mom was a writer forever.
Yeah.
I remember going to writers' groups when I was a kid. I used to get dragged to them. Dragged, kicking and screaming because I wasn't participating, but I was a kid and I had nowhere to go, right?
Right, yeah.
So I'd be sitting there listening to these writers talking about whatever. So I've always been a part of that, but, and I'm not sure how much I actually paid attention to things probably until the last 10 years or so. And really in the last 5 or 6 years when I became a writer, that's when I started paying more attention to her work on the book. And I wanted, to learn about what she was writing and what she wanted to do with it. And she was always working on it. she was a perfectionist. She was never finished. Like, she could spend an hour on a word. So it was never ready, never ready, never ready. And we would talk about it. But I remember going through scenes with her, and it was just, it was really fun.
Do you think that she was disappointed that she didn't finish this on her own? Did you have conversations about that?
I think so, but gosh, she passed away when she was 88. Well, by the last few years, I mean, she was active, but she was tired.
Yeah.
You know, and it's work to write a novel.
Yeah. 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 Especially when you're writing something different than what you normally would write. Right. That's a new muscle, a new skill, a new talent. Just like you're doing,
Yes.
helping her finish the book. It was new for her to write this as well.
Exactly.
Where did the story idea come from to write the book? Do you know where she got the inspiration to even write the book?
Well, yeah, the initial iteration of the book was when she was still living in New England, and it was about a group of women that lived up there that were friends. And then she moved to Florida a little after we did. And then she changed the setting to Florida. And then she changed a lot of stuff about it when she joined a writers group down here in Florida. So it's always been about women and friendship and trying to deal with the complexities and challenges of getting older.
Okay. All right. So who would be the ideal reader for this? We have lots of readers who love to fall in love with a new book, a new author, and they're listening to this going, this might be my new favorite book. Tell me, like, who you think would be a great reader for this book.
I think the most obvious choice would be someone who is maybe looking to live their best life after 50. So someone who is over 50 and is looking for inspiration, looking for some fun. But I've had other folks, we've had a few early readers that are younger that say they really enjoy it because it's, you know, it's a cross between Schitt's Creek and the Golden Girls on a budget.
That's a good image.
Right?
I love that.
That's how I explain it. And I can tell you, from what I know about the Golden Girls, so many young people love the Golden Girls because they love funny older characters. And that's where my mom excelled. And there's some laugh out loud funny, really good scenes there. But there's also some meat to the story. It's not, you know, fluff. Yeah. But because of those things, because it's a crazy setting and there's some fun and funny older characters, people really of all ages might enjoy it.
And I like your little nod to Schitt's Creek because that's a Canadian-made show.
I know, and I love
and it's
Schitt's
made
Creek.
Close to my house, and there you go. So that's pretty
that.
amazing. Yeah, it's a good show.
And
it's a good visual.
And my goal, just so you know, is for this to be a TV series. It was Mom's goal too. So if you know any of those guys, please tell them. There's parts for them.
You never know who's listening to this.
You never know,
right?
You have to put it into the universe.
You do. I love it. Okay, so what's the basic story? Give us a story plot for the book so we have an idea where we're going in the book as well.
So it starts with the main character, Debbie, who finally has a chance to get out of New England and move away because her only child and family move away for the husband's job. So Debbie, who has sort of put up with a lot of stuff her whole life, she's a legal secretary, she's ready to retire, she's held on for a long time. She's tired of the cold, she wants to move somewhere warm. But her daughter wants her to move to Delaware, where they moved. Probably to become her unpaid nanny, but, you know, she's just saying, well, you know, you can stay with us, you'll have us, you don't know anyone in Florida, whatever. So they go back and forth because she and her daughter are close, and her daughter Lori is kind of a helicopter daughter. And they make an agreement. And that agreement is that Debbie has 6 months, which is the term of her rental lease, to make a life in Florida. And make a life for her means to have a great life, to then find somewhere she can live permanently and to really enjoy Florida. If not, she has to move back in with her daughter's family in Delaware.
Okay.
Okay, so it's basically Debbie Gordon has 6 months to get a life. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so that's the premise. And then, of course, Debbie travels to Florida. She's very excited. You know, how hard can this be? I mean, it's Florida, big deal, right? It's warm, easy. She's retired. But she ends up finding out that her condo community isn't what she expected. And that's the nod to the Schitt's Creek. So I won't give too many spoilers away.
Yeah.
She eventually, luckily, runs into a couple of women who become her friends, and they make up the Cabernet Club. So it's Debbie, Maria, and Fran. And they help Debbie with a series of issues that she has to deal with in Florida. Everything from a medical mystery to a nemesis from Debbie's past to ageism at work. She has to get a part-time job because it's getting more expensive. All kinds of things. And then, of course, there's romance. So there's all these kind of things that Debbie has to learn to navigate. And it's what a lot of people have to navigate. A lot of women over 50 choose to move away, right? And they have to start again. So there's fun and funny and drama, but some of this, there's also a little bit of education in here. Because my mom and I were very pro helping others. So we slid in there a few kind of like tips on how to get this done, where, you know, Debbie might be brainstorming and helping them, or they might come up with something that sounds really intriguing that can be really helpful. So the goal really is to make this show up like the motto of the Cabernet Club, which Debbie came up with, which is, why can't the rest of your life be the best of your life?
That's got a nice ring to that. I like that.
Thank you.
That's good. So as you're writing this and working with what your mom had already created, as you write, were you trying to write in the voice of your mother, or were you trying to write in your voice?
100% my mother. And I'm very fortunate because prior to this, my mother was my first editor, okay? And when I started writing full time, she literally would edit everything I wrote. So I knew what my voice was. And by the way, it's pretty close to hers. Not because we worked together, but just, you know, genetics, I guess, right?
Yeah.
So I was familiar with that. I was familiar with her voice because over the years, you know, I've read her other books. You know, her young adult novels were about young adult characters, but there were older characters in there. Her voice has always stayed the same. So I was very familiar with it. And my goal was to be true to her voice because, again, it was hers. So I really leaned into that. And I want people, unless they know me and they know certain parts that I definitely wrote, which I won't tell you, you know, certain activities or whatever, I don't want them to realize that I wrote it versus my mom. I want it to be seamless.
Yeah. How do you think she would feel knowing the book's coming out in the next few days? How excited would she be that it got to the goal and we finished it?
I think she would be super excited, and I think she would be even more excited that I did it because she would always want me to do writing. She would always push me to do different kinds of writing. So the fact that this did that, I think she'd probably be smiling and probably laughing, thinking, aha, I got her to move out of her comfort zone, to really push on this, and maybe this will open up new areas for me. So I think she'd be very pleased.
Do you think it's going to open up new areas for you then? Would you agree with her?
I do, because I really thought this was a one and done project. But then I really started falling in love with the characters, and I started just throwing some ideas together and thinking, well, what if I did this? What if I did that? And I ended up with a second and a third book outlined. So I think I may be continuing with that.
Did your mother have any concept of maybe this being more than a one book release? Did she have a series in mind?
She had a second book in mind, which
Good.
I'm incorporating parts of it in. It's different. But there is a part of it that I will keep in. But yeah, she had wanted to do that too.
It's amazing. I love that you're carrying this on for her, finishing something that she was passionate about to start,
Right.
right, and poured her heart into it, and that you get the chance to pick up and carry this on for her. That's it's a great story. And I think when we see your book on a website or on a store shelf, we don't really understand that there's two names on here and the story behind it.
Right.
So I think as a reader, we get more out of this just understanding that.
Right.
So I'm really glad that you can share that part of this too. That's great.
Thank you.
What is your hope for the book? As people read it, as people fall in love with it, what is your goal? Like, what do you want people to take out of this book as they finish reading this?
Well, like I said, I think this is a gift to the world.
Yeah.
My mom's gift to the world. I can tell you that having older protagonists is very unusual in novels, which is pretty silly considering that probably most readers are over 50, at least of novels, I would say, or at least a good chunk of them, especially people in book clubs, that kind of thing. So first of all, finding people that they can relate to that are older is something that's really important. But also, I think that the message I would really hope to get out there is that we can have hope. We can be empowered as we age, even when we're on a budget. And I say that because many books, my mom and I used to talk about this all the time. My mom didn't have a lot of money, and she had to live on a budget. So some of the stuff in this book is pretty close to home. But, you know, it's much easier to live well when you're older if you have a lot of money. And that's what a lot of novels have. They'll have a protagonist with some huge business that's very unlikely, very unrealistic, you know. And a lot of this is very, very realistic, but it shows how you can still have a life. So we wanted to keep it real and show that there's hope no matter what circumstances you're in, whether you have financial or health difficulties or family issues or any other kinds of conflict. Even when you're older and even when you're in a new place, you can still bloom and have the life you want to have.
Out of the main characters in the book, is there one that you feel really attracted to or that resonates with you personally? That's the person I would like to meet or know.
Well, I think you can't help rooting for Debbie, the main character, because she's really in a rough place when she starts, and she really has a long way to go in a short time. So you're really rooting for her. But I think people will relate to the other characters in different ways. And that's interesting that you say that, because I plan on expanding the storylines of the Cabernet Club members, plus another one, an honorary member, in the next book. So I think people get a taste of that, but anyone they relate to, I think, is great.
Do you have any tips for authors who are picking up a project maybe someone else has started and they're going to step in like you did and kind of complete the project? Anything that you learned in the process of doing this that could help another author?
Oh, gosh. I made so many notes about things I learned. It's crazy, but I will give you my top ones. How about that?
Okay. Yes, that's great.
So my biggest challenge, and I still find this challenging, is building conflict into every scene and creating a strong central conflict. And I think this is especially difficult for women's fiction. Okay, so I read thrillers and mysteries. Those conflicts are pretty, I don't know about easy. I don't know if that's the right word. It's much easier to come up with a conflict if there's a murder or if, some terrorist is going to do something, right? I mean, those are pretty obvious external conflicts. But when you have women's fiction, to try and come up with conflicts that actually connect with readers and that are actually strong enough to drive a story is very difficult. So I really had to work on that and kind of get that shaped up in this story. I had to work on the messy middle, which is something I learned about, where you kind of have to add some more conflict. And then there's like a hopeless part where you make it even worse. It's like, to me, it's like all about conflict, especially when you don't have an obvious antagonist. So there are a few people you could maybe think were antagonists in this, but really in character-driven fiction, the antagonist can be a lot of things. It can be the setting, it can be your personal journey, it can be society at large. So I think really understanding conflict, learning about it, whether that's by listening to podcasts, getting help from someone, whatever. I think, as Jerry Jenkins said, and he has a nice website that says this, conflict is the engine of fiction. I don't think people realize that you can't just tell a nice story. People don't want a nice story. That's not realistic. They want to have bad things happen. They might want them to overcome, the characters to overcome those bad things, but they want ups and downs. That's life. So conflict is really, really key. And that's something I would really lean into.
That's interesting. You mentioned that there were some podcasts that really helped you in your journey.
Yeah.
Any of those come to mind at all that we can share? Because I know people want to listen to more podcasts. So I'd love to tell them about the shows that you loved.
Yeah, I would say my favorite is Fiction Writing Made Easy by Savannah Gilbo.
Okay.
Yep. She writes about conflict, everything. I've learned so much from her show, and it's phenomenal. I've gone back, I think she's done it over a couple years. I've gone back, 2 years, and I'll be like, that's a great episode. I want to, if I'm working on a part, maybe I need to know about scene structure or, like I was saying, progressive complications. Can usually find really specific stuff. So that would probably be my favorite.
Have you ever reached out to that podcaster and let them know how much this podcast means to you?
It's in my acknowledgements page.
Really?
Yeah. So I put a few podcasts in my acknowledgements. I'm not silly.
Nice.
I'm not stupid.
Nice.
But
there you go.
Sorry, Dave. It was already printed before I talked to you. I'm sorry. But maybe the next book. Okay.
Yeah.
I probably will. In fact, now that you mentioned it, I really should. So yeah, I will.
As a podcaster, we love to hear from listeners. And the fact that you have such a connection with this podcast and it's helped you so much.
Yeah.
I think you could, just hearing from you, I think that podcaster is going to feel so inspired to keep podcasting and keep doing the show. A lot of times as podcasters, we never hear from our audience. And a lot of listeners just assume that we know that the podcast is meaningful to them, but we don't know. Like, we can see numbers, but we don't know really if anyone's really listening or loving what we're doing. And there's times where podcasters might even toy with the idea of giving up because they never hear from their listeners. So the fact that this podcast means so much to you, I know that they would love to hear your voice and for you to share your thoughts with them. It will mean the world to them to hear that you are successful because of something that they did on their podcast. I think that's a great relationship. And I'm glad you found that as a resource as well in the process of writing.
Okay. I'm making a commitment to you right now. You can record it, that I will reach out to Savannah and tell her all about this.
All right. And Savannah, if you're listening, thank you for creating a great podcast that helped in this situation to help another author. That's a great moment. I really love that.
Thanks. Thank you.
Excellent. So my podcast is called Living the Next Chapter. So I have to ask, from your perspective, and I know we're going to celebrate the launch of the book. We're not going to rush through this at all. We want to really enjoy every moment of this book coming into the world. But I do have to ask, because it's the name of the show. How are you living your next chapter? Kind of what's coming down the road for you long after the book is celebrated and launched? How are you living your next chapter? What's coming up for you?
Yeah, it really means working on the next book and the next book and doing what I need to do with my publisher to try and get interest for a TV series or movie. Because this stuff I think is important to the world, and that's what I'm going to focus on.
I love it. So can we please agree together, you and I, that we'll have you back to talk about the next in the series of the books as a returning guest, and that the moment you find out that this has been greenlit and it's going to be a movie or a TV show or series on Netflix or something, that you and I will get together and celebrate the fact that you said it out loud, the universe heard you, and magically the right person heard this episode and went, you know what? I think we got something here. I want to celebrate that moment with you, and I'm already anticipating it's going to happen.
Wow. I am all in.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. I think we're going to make this happen.
All right.
I don't know how we're going to do it, but I just know it's going to happen because good things happen to good people. And I think your mother would be thrilled to hear about this and thrilled to hear you talk about this book today on the podcast. I think she would be smiling from ear to ear.
Too.
Right? Mm-hmm. Excellent. So tell us where we're going to go to stay in touch with you. I know I'm seeing on your website a picture of a beautiful motorcycle, and I'm curious to click on this and see your posts. And I also see 5 types of friends every woman over 50 needs, also on your website. Take us to your website so that we can follow your journey, stay in touch, know where you're going to be and where the book is going to be available. Take us to your website. Where do we go?
So my website is margiezfisher.com, which is MARGIE, middle initial Z like zebra, Fisher, FISHER.com. So margiezfisher.com. And what you will find when you get there is, first of all, if you sign up for my VIP club, which is free, you will get a free chapter that I'm still debating whether or not I should have cut from the novel. And so you get a little extra thing there. But you'll also get updates on various events I'm doing around the country and anything I've written and any news, like when my audiobook is going to come out and all that kind of stuff. So
Good.
That's what you do.
Excellent. I love it. It's a beautiful website, by the way, Margie. I love everything on here. It's well done, easy to navigate. There's so much good information here. I love it. Before we go, as a fellow motorcycle rider, what's harder, finishing a book that your mother started and writing and completing the book, or learning how to ride a motorcycle? What's harder?
Let me tell you, I don't want to give too many spoilers away, but one spoiler was I did not pass my motorcycle test the first time, and
oh no,
it was excruciatingly frustrating. So yeah, I have a blog, so that's where I wrote about my motorcycle experience, which was during the 50th year of experiences. But there's ups and downs in life, but I sure learned a lot from it.
There you go. So watch out, everybody, because Margie's going to pass you in the fast lane. I'm riding down on a motorcycle. Watch out. She's fun to watch. I love it. Margie, thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you.
You're a great guest.
Thank you.
I hope you do more and more and more of these because you're an excellent person to talk to. I love listening to you and hearing the story behind the book. So please do more podcast guesting. You're doing so well at this. I'm really a big fan. So thank you for making time for this.
Thank you for having me.
Excellent. Everyone, as always, you know where to go. Go to the show notes. You'll have a link straight to Margie's website. Make sure you buy the book. And when you buy the book, buy 2 copies, one for you, one for your favorite friend and family member. Send it to them so they have it. And then leave a beautiful, thoughtful, detailed review wherever you buy the book so more people will fall in love with it as well. so that we can all be a part of the Cabernet Club. Together, we can do that by simply leaving great reviews. So that's my encouragement to you as a listener. That way, I know that Margie would love to hear your thoughts about the book.
Yes.
And be inspired to continue writing. So Margie, again, thank you so much for doing this.
Thanks again.
Hey, thanks for being here for the Living the Next Chapter podcast. So glad to have you as part of our family of listeners. There's a seat for you just here on Living the Next Chapter, and I'm so happy that you have listened to all the way to the end. Wow, you are now my new bestie. I want to let you know that I host 7 other podcasts on top of Living the Next Chapter. Yep, 8 total. One of them is called the How To Podcast series. If you are thinking, you know what, Dave, this podcast thing seems like a lot of fun. Well, I'll give you a secret. It is. It's a great, amazing, fun time where you can get to meet great people, get your word out there, promote your book, promote what your coaching program, whatever you're doing. Podcasting is great. And if you want to learn how to do this, what you're hearing right now, head over to howtopodcast.ca and look up the How to Podcast series on YouTube, whatever app you're listening on. You'll find me there. And I'd love for you to come listen to how to do this. And if you're interested and have questions on how to podcast, reach out to me at howtopodcast.ca. Thank you for listening. Talk soon.